things theology, all things theology. We chop it up properly without an apology. Gotta give doxology to God hollow, because this is how we do it at All Things Theology.
Yo, grace and peace, guys. Welcome to another episode of All Things Theology, where I'm your host, K-Dub. And man, I know I say this every episode. I say it just about every episode. You're going to enjoy this one. If you've been following what I've been doing on YouTube for any amount of years, you know that I've been passionate about addressing Hebrew Israelite. Last person I addressed is Eshon Burgundy. We'll get into that more as well. But today, as you see from the title, Street Hymns, a battle rapper, a Christian artist, has embraced Hebrew Israelism. He has embraced the identity claim that he is a Hebrew Israelite. And what we'll do in this episode, in this podcast, is to break down what that means specifically for him and not maybe other people. And so we will be accurate and fair to him. So I hope he watches this video. I hope there can be a future dialogue between me and him, and we can discuss some of these reasons why I disagree. Obviously, I'll state in this video, but maybe we can go further with me and him. I think that'd be dope. And so you guys know how I do. I like to get right into it. I don't like to waste a lot of time. So let's do that. All right.
That's awesome. And we met in LA. Absolutely. And it was interesting hearing your story because you identify as Hebrew.
Yes.
And when
I think that's kind of funny. This is kind of my assessment of it right now. But like, identify as Hebrew. It's kind of like people like, you identify as a male, you identify as, XYZ. I'm pretty sure that's not how it was taken to be, but that's kind of how it sounds to me. But either you are a Hebrew or you're not, and so, but yeah, I just thought that was kind of humorous at first, but we'll get into it.
Hebrew Israelites, I think of the people that follow us to every stop and every tourist stop and cause a scene. So when I heard your story, I was like, oh, that's fascinating, because what I want to help people to see is that there's a spectrum.
Yes, and there is. And if you initially think like she does, Lisa Fields, this is a Jude 3 project. I've I've reviewed a lot of material from them to show that Jude 3 project is not the best when it comes to apologetics, but that's another video for another time. And you can check out my videos I've done on that, where, they've literally allowed a platform for people who say Jesus is not the only way to heaven. But like I said, you can check that out. If you want to know, leave a comment. I'll send you that information. But anyways, yeah, if you only think there's only certain types of Hebrew Israelites that go on the street and curse white people all out, you set yourself up for failure when you meet a non-extremist, or what in the apologetic field we've come to label it as non-one West. So you meet a Street Hymns or Eshon Burgundy or someone of that matter, and you're like, hey, why are you so nice? Or why you don't act like this? And it's like, it can cause an alarm, and it can set you up for failure, honestly. And so just like her, it sets you up for failure to believe there's only one sect of the Hebrew Israelite camp or movement.
Absolutely.
And I think we do a disservice to any group when we label them all as the extremes we might have encountered.
For sure.
And so tell us kind of what was that journey like? How did you start to identify as a Hebrew? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, so, and like, first of all, I'm a skeptic first, and I'm a very literal person. Not that I can't see nuance, but when it comes to definitions, that's the first thing before a conversation begins I try to do is like, I can say something, but if you have a different definition of what this means, then we're going to be talking about two different things. Mm-hmm. And so the term Hebrew Israelite, Paul said, I am a Hebrew from the tribe of Benjamin. Paul is a Hebrew Israelite.
Yeah, in a strict literal sense, but not in the sense that you guys use the term, because he never once made the argument for being a Hebrew Israelite in the way you or even the extremists, because you guys, I know you don't want to label yourself an extremist, and I think that's fair. I won't label you a one West or an extremist, but on this identity claim, you guys agree and have the same arguments generally. Some of the arguments you're going to present here are some of the ones I've heard from the guys on the streets that even you don't like. Okay, so just to be fair, you guys have the same argument, and the Apostle Paul never uses the argument for why he's a Hebrew as you do. I think you got to be open to admitting and realizing that, So on the basis, you guys have two different claims to why you're even a Hebrew, and Paul never focuses so much importance on it like a lot of Hebrew Israelites do. Um, he never surrounded around his identity. Obviously, it was found in Jesus Christ. So that's not to say he wasn't a Hebrew. Ethnically, he was obviously.
Literally, that's just the facts. All the disciples were Hebrew Israelites, you know. And
That's not even true because you had some Gentile believers. So if you meant apostles, okay, I think that's what you're trying to say. Okay, yes, but disciples, there was actually Greek believers and all sorts of stuff.
so the term itself just means a Hebrew person, you know, and Hebrew is ethnicity, not religion. You know,
It's actually both. Um, the for the Hebrew time for the Israelites in the day of Jesus, it actually was a religious claim. It being Hebrew is a religion as well as a um, um, ethnic claim. You know, being a Jew is that, and a lot of people try to distinguish these two things, and we're gonna get to why I believe that, but I just want you to first to know that there is this trying to distinction between making a ethnic claim versus making a theological claim, and I believe there's reasons why that's being done, um, but we'll get into that here in a second.
you can be a Hebrew atheist, you know, and so uh, when it comes to recognizing it first as a ethnicity and not a religious claim, I think it really, really clarifies things for people that have this mindset that, oh, because you identify as Hebrew and you're a POC, you now therefore yell at white people on the streets and call them Edomites and say you're going to bow down to me. And it's like, no, like first of all, that's not biblical. That's heresy, and it's offensive.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you condemn those actions. So I'll where you're right and where you're good. I'm gonna give you your props. So for the one Westers, street hymns ain't on your side. But yeah, that's absolutely right. You know, it is. But this actually shows maybe how much street hymns have not been aware of the different kind of apologists that are aware of the different types of Hebrew Israelites. I can name myself, Vocab. I've been putting in work. A lot of people, Rick Caldwell's another guy I think of, apologist, who's very aware of what has been come to known as one Westers and non-one Westers. You have your extremists, one West, and you have your non-extremists, non-one West. Very simple, right? And so there are many people who know, hey, just because you say you're black, or just because you're black and you say, hey, I'm a Hebrew, not all know what from my mind, because I do work in this apologetic field, um, is not coming to think, oh, he's out in the front line cussing people out. That's not my first thought. My first thought is, okay, I want to see kind of how um, what that looks like for you. And generally, you kind of know already the guys who are out in the streets. You can kind of already tell from the first time, you know. And I wouldn't have ever thought that from, street hymns.
Know, and for me, collaboration within the church, collaboration within unity, within diversity, is what the gospel is all about.
And so he's going to actually flesh that out a little bit more later. And so I'm going to allow him to. But he's kind of speaking about like just diversity within like all these movements. It's okay to collaborate with Hebrew Israelites and other movements. I'm actually going to show how that's actually very inconsistent. But for now, just know that's what he means. And like I said, it's going to be fleshed out a little later.
And for me, when I first heard about it, I was one of the people that was very, very skeptical towards it, against it, just because, just my roots theologically, I was just, trained to attack it, and so I had some brothers who I knew were Christians, knew were believers, and they were like, yeah, I claim to be Hebrew. I said, wait, but you're a Christian. And he was like, yeah, I am a Christian religiously, but I think that I'm ethnically Hebrew, and for me, that shocked me because I was like, how can you be claiming to be a Hebrew but also be a Christian? Because the Hebrews I know are the people I'm debating against on the streets. I'm fresh.
So this kind of really shows that, to be fair, Street Hymns, you were, and this isn't a shot at your talent intelligence. I think you are a smart guy. You were ignorant of the many kinds of Hebrew Israelites. Let's just be honest. You didn't know of the non-one Westers. You didn't know of the non-extremists. And so when you met one, it kind of threw you off guard. It threw you back. You didn't know how to really react and respond to that. So you were not prepared. You had not been exposed to this kind of thinking, and those are people in the most danger to be. I'm going to use this kind of language, being held captive to those movements, to people who are unaware. And so that's just kind of how. I mean, that's your breakdown of it. I mean, I think you would have to agree you were not ready for the non-extremists, the guys who are not on the streets but claim to be Hebrew.
Bible college, and whenever I see him, I'm pulling up to go have a conversation, and I still do that now. It's just a whole different conversation from a different angle now. So for me personally, it really wasn't first starting theological. It was first historical, and then ancestral. So historically, just kind of tracing things, understanding that.
But that's a bit. So that's a bit backwards from my perspective. So you came to this historic genealogy position, and by the way, for full disclosure, I'm not, and I don't know anyone who takes this position. I've never made the claim that black people cannot be Israelite ethnically. And so if he just made a claim, hey, I'm a Hebrew Israelite because, ethnic claim, I did my, research, I got, DNA or whatever, how he came to that conclusion, said, I found out I was Hebrew. I'd be like, all right, cool, whatever. But that's not all. And so he does make it from a theological standpoint, just from talking with him on Twitter. I'm not going to disclose our conversation because it was in private, but I hope to one day talk about some of the things we did talk about. There is a theological claim, but how he arrived there was tracing this history. And we're going to talk about how the history comes about, right, through slavery and the 400 years, and then maybe some lucid genealogy records, and then you import that to the Bible, and then that's how you come up with the theological basis for your position, right? Because hey, it was prophetic that the Israelites would go through captivity or slavery or some kind of bondage for 400 years, and see. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to release his position quite yet. We'll talk about that maybe sometime in the road. Maybe we'll have a conversation, but it's coming to a theological position actually backwards. You're starting outside the Bible and then saying, hey, then placing that onto the scriptures. That's actually a backwards way to get to what God has said, and importing out, and it's kind of like almost you have this outside revelation as well. So that even brings up other theological issues that I would be interested in to hear his perspective on.
Slave trade first began in Spain and Portugal, and then from Spain and Portugal to Northwest Africa, which is where most people, when you do our DNA test, we end up being located in Northwest Africa.
And that kind of brings up another question. If the blacks are Israelites, what about the people who weren't descended from the transatlantic slave trade, or who weren't descended from Africa? So this kind of raises up a whole nother issue for his position about the non-African people who look black. I hate that term because that doesn't describe anything about you, because you can be black and be from Australia, like be ethnically an Australian and a French, from France. And so I remember from the first time me meeting a black dude from France, and it like totally threw me off. He had the accent and everything, and I was just like, "Whoa, black people can't be French. We're only Africans, right?" I had a ignorant historical basis of black, because black doesn't actually describe anything besides your skin color. It doesn't tell you actually where you're from. And so, yeah, there are people who are not from Africa who did not come from the transatlantic slave trade. Are you saying that they have, they are still an Israelite even though they haven't experienced this captivity? Deuteronomy 28, right? I'd be curious to know. Like I said, this interview actually raises a lot more questions than it answers.
Researching the names of the people on these ships, and seeing that a majority of them had Yah in their name, like their origin names were Yah, and these are all records you can search.
So this one's kind of humorous because having Yah in your name does not mean you're in Hebrew. Just like having Yamazaki, or there's a lot of Asian names who go from that. So are you saying now Asians are Israelites because, hey, they have that Yamasaki and all that, and so that's absurd. That's an absurd position to hold. And that's, yeah, it's reading that back into your position. It's anecdotal evidence. It's not real evidence. It's just anecdotal. Hey, look, you're drawing the conclusion that, of course they were Israelites. They had Yah in their name. Okay, well, that doesn't mean anything.
In the slave documents and stuff like that from the slave trades, they'll tell you their name, their height, and then they'll also say their original name and things like that. And one of the biggest things for me.
So one of the biggest evidences, right? So so this should be like hey man, why should I become a Christian? Give me your biggest argument, right? This should be your strongest evidence. If this fails, then everything else that follows isn't as strong, okay? Right? His biggest, his strongest, one of the reasons that convinced him that he was a Hebrew Israelite, ethnically.
Aside from the historical aspect, was a part of history for myself. So
it's still a historical claim.
There's a church in Savannah, Georgia called First African Baptist Church. And this church was built in 1859 by slaves.
But notice it was called First African, not First Hebrew, if they thought they were Hebrews. That's kind of ironic, right? Like, even in the name of the church, they're not even claiming to be Hebrews, but African. But nevertheless, I'll let them continue.
And on the side of the pews is Hebrew writing. It is a mixture of Hebrew Latin writing. It's called Ladino, right? And the Ladino is Hebrew Latin. Why? Because Spain and Portugal, right? And the Hebrew language was not revived until, according to America, I think 1881, right? So this is roughly.
I would have to look into that, but is he saying no one was speaking Hebrew until the 1800s? I need more clarification on what he's talking about there. But notice his biggest argument is that inside this first African church, which they, I guess they were Hebrews, in the 1800s, on the side of the pew is a Latin Hebrew phrase. Let's go Latin and Hebrew. All right. So therefore, the conclusion wants to lead you to these people were claiming to be Hebrew ethnically. Well, one, that doesn't follow logically. Two, this story has actually been debunked by Vocab alone. I'll have to link to that video. Hopefully, I can put it up above. Vocab, and not just Vocab, other people, Abu, Faithful to God, other people have long debunked this story. And two, or maybe I'm on point 3 by now, he let the cat out the bag, because now I know where he's getting his sources from. He's getting his sources from Dante Fortson, because Dante Fortson was one of the first ones developing the story. And this was really strong in the non-One Wester camps. I didn't really see a lot of One Westers promoting this. I'm sure there were, but this was definitely a non-One West kind of argument for being ethnic Hebrew Israelite. So he let the cat get out the bag. Sorry, I keep messing up that phrase. And Dante Fortson has long been developing, or I don't know if he's promoting it so much now, but the 400-year prophecy, about 1619 to 2019 or around that area. And like I said, we've talked about that failed prophecy before. And so, like I said, if you want to, I'll probably have to link to that video just to get you guys some background on some of the things he's claiming. And by the way, I think actually me and Vocab are going to come together and talk about this video as well and give a fuller analysis. So yeah, we're not done yet, so to speak.
Years beforehand. So who taught them how to do this? When you look at this writing, why is it that this Landino is being spoken with? Because we learn in history books growing up, it's like, oh, well, they were illiterate. No, if I go to Asia, I'm not illiterate. I just don't their language. They had a language before they arrived.
Yeah, and like I said, even if I granted that the language they were speaking were this Hebrew Latin, it doesn't follow that they themselves are Hebrew. That's one. If I learn Spanish somehow and go to Spain or go to some other country, doesn't mean I'm actually Spaniard or Mexican or whatever term you want to use. Anyways, two, it's been debunked that it's actual Hebrew. So there's that. That's the real argument. It's been debunked. It's not actually a Hebrew phrase on the side of this pew. And you would expect from actual Hebrews that you would find a lot more than a Hebrew phrase on the side of a pew. I mean, you would expect to see a lot more than that. But nevertheless.
You know what I'm saying? So if that language was pure to them, and this is what they were writing on the side of the pews, and no one taught it to them, I think that's worth seeing. Come to find out, as a child, I would go there to our family reunions because it was my ancestors who built that church. And so understanding the rich part of my history, knowing that whoever these people were, that were my ancestors, were the ones who put their hands to build these and write these letters on there, that's who I'm connected to. And they called themselves Hebrews.
Whoa. Where did they call themselves Hebrew, Street Hymns? Notice the conclusion? They didn't actually call themselves Hebrew. We have a disputed Hebrew phrase. And then that's somehow supposed to lead you to, they call themselves Hebrews. How did you come to that conclusion? That was actually never said. Like I said, the so-called Hebrew phrase is supposed to lead you to believe that these people were Hebrew. Guess what? There's Hebrew phrases in the King James Bible, or from the originators. That mean they were Hebrew Israelites.
I call myself Hebrew. So it's an ethnic claim first, and has, not to say it has nothing to do religiously, because there are religious principles that apply, but I don't take the religious aspect and then say, oh, I now call myself a da-da-da, because what happens is people hear that and their mind is shifted so quickly because I say that. They don't even want to associate.
No, there are a lot of people who understand the nuances, especially if they're dealing with it from an apologetic purpose. Kind of, like I said, the people I brought up earlier. And so, no, there's a lot of people who do understand the nuance. That if you said you're a Hebrew Israelite, the first question they're probably thinking is, okay, what kind? And that would pretty come out in the conversation they would have or the questioning. Because if I want to find out real quick if you're a one Wester or a non-one Wester, I can ask, hey, do you believe Gentiles can be saved? You say no, okay, all right, you're probably not an extremist, probably, because you do got GOCC, that camp. So generally, that is a surrounding theme of extremists. So no, there are a lot of people who would understand if you say, hey, I'm an Hebrew Israelite. Okay, the nuance there. So I understand that, no, I'm not even going to get into that.
To a term that is being...
You know what, I'll say it. I understand the motivation for not wanting to call yourself a Hebrew Israelite. Because you think it'll associate with people who have heretical views. And you do have that in non-one Westers. You do have that, and we'll get into that in a second. You do have terrible theology, heretical views from the people that you're associating yourself with. And we're going to talk about that.
Used so generically, kind of like how some people who are Christians, it's like, oh, I don't like to use the word Christian because, and
I love to use the term Christian because I don't mind associating myself with Christ. And guess what? It gives me an explanation to when people say, oh, so you think this way? No, absolutely not. Let me give you my hope, or let me give you the reasoning. Because this is actually an evangelism tool to even call myself a Christian. Because now I get to explain what that means, biblically speaking.
It's really just, not to say be safer, but to be wise and just like, I would rather you see the fruit before you judge the tree. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I'm like, hey, like, I'm fully a Christian. I'm fully a follower of the way. It's just ethnically, I believe that my people were Hebrew and I'm a Hebrew. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
And so far, we haven't provided any kind of basis for that, you know, theologically speaking.
interesting the way you frame that, because I don't think, like you said, most people jump to who they see on the street,
Oh
so
yeah,
that it's conflated.
yeah.
Um,
Uh, I don't think most people think that. I think maybe most of you guys think that because maybe you're not dealing with them. Put like this: most people who deal with Hebrew Israelites don't think like that. They understand the nuance. So that just kind of tells me that you're not really dealing with Hebrew Israelites in that manner. So yeah.
what has that done for you? Do you feel like a sense of identity was connected to that? Like you felt connected to something?
Yeah, so I feel as though the Black community in general is clinging to identify to something because
I, I mean, I honestly think that's like everybody. I think a lot of people struggle with identity issues, but hence why I will share the gospel with them and show them their need for Christ and have their identity in Him. Because being a Hebrew actually is ethnically speaking does not give one identity in itself either, because we were not made for that purpose. And so I'm sure you would agree with this fully, but yeah, that's what I would respond to that.
identity was stripped from us, and it was done intentionally. And because of that, I believe that whether it be
And this is kind of another Hebrew Israelite argument that, you know, people from the transatlantic slave trade kind of lost their identity. They forgot who they were. And I think many people go to passages like Deuteronomy 29, Deuteronomy 30. I can't remember off the top of my head. But just because you're enslaved don't mean you forget who you are. I mean, the Exodus for one matter. They were enslaved. They still knew they were Hebrews. They still knew they were Jews. And so this argument fails because just like I said, being stripped of identity doesn't mean you don't know who you are ethnically. And so, yeah, I don't believe that argument follows as well.
other religious, spiritual, or ethnic ties, when somebody can give you a affirmation and tell you, hey, we were kings, or hey, we're gods, or hey, the black man is this. It's like, man, it's better than this term African American. It's better than etc. or other.
Uh, so being told a lie, I guess, is better than being told you're African of African descent. Um, I don't believe that. Like I said, a lot of people's hope is in being ethnically a Hebrew. A lot of people's are. I'm not saying that for street, but I know a lot of people, man, they came to this Hebrew identity, and it was like they found the gospel. Like, man, I was so elated when I found out a Hebrew. Like, I mean, you hear a lot of that language. But being told let's go with this second one. Being told you're a god is not better than being told you're an African American. Why? Because that's a lie. You're not a god. You're not a god. And so being told a lie is not better than being told you're an African American. And so or he says, we were kings. Yeah, you see a lot of that language, but yeah, I don't know, man. I just don't believe it's better to tell, even from his perspective, you're a king, you're a god. Let's say you're not African American. Um, well, one's heretical. Being told you're a god is, calling people God. That's a heretical view. Um, but being told you're African American, let's say it isn't. That's not a heretical view. That's just a misplaced ethnic lineage.
you know it kind of it gives you a sense of identity to know that you're more than what you're being told in your life, in your experiences. And so um for me, like I said, it was historical and ethnic and ancestral. But when I actually got to see that, as I read the scriptures now, I don't read the scriptures and say, oh, they and them. I look, it's like us and we, and I apply things that are spoken to the people of.
Yeah. So, like I said, I wouldn't I wouldn't really have an issue with that if that was like just understanding like the people of God, like yeah, the people of faith, like Abraham's the father of faith. So we can say we in that sense, right? We have a great cloud of witnesses, right? Yeah. So, but from this misplaced theological claim, historical claim that he's a Hebrew, he's I am of these people. And so,
I, you know what I'm saying, to myself, to my family, to my community. And it's really about, following the commandments, following the statutes, listening to what he's saying so that we can be blessed, you know.
so the covenant of works, Deuteronomy 28, placing yourself back under that. Um, the blessings for obedience, curses for disobedience, right? You're saying Matthew 28 is applying to the to black people, which I would challenge anyone actually go read Matthew 28. One, to see if it applies to the slave trade, um, and two, you do not want Deuteronomy 28 to be a principle of the covenant of works. This is theological concept. Street Hymns probably knows what I'm talking about since he went to Bible school. Um, you do not want that principle overriding your life. So yeah.
And through the blessings, we can allow others to be blessed as well. And so it's certain things like following the Sabbath, and also
So now he's a Sabbatarian, which I take great issue with. Not calling him a like. Hopefully he hears me through this video, or the listeners. I'm not calling Street Hymns a heretic because of this position. I do think there are problematic issues, and I've seen once people made that claim, they've gone to heretical views and they've gone down a dangerous road. And so I do have concern from that perspective, but I'm not saying he's not a Christian. I don't know his theology well enough. From everything, from many things I've heard from him, he's in orthodoxy. Not on this issue, I don't think, but like I said, there's a sub-orthodoxy and then there's heretical, views. And so I'm not saying Street Hymns is not a Christian because of his view. So because that's what he kind of thinks, like, a lot of people think. So yeah, just I'm being clear with my motives.
Ending that sacrificial laws obviously don't apply because we have the ultimate sacrifice in Christ.
So he's saying kind of like we need to reinstitute the whole Old Testament except for like sacrificial stuff. But what about the temple? Because that was centered around the worship of the people of Yah, right? To use that language. What about other things? What about other sacrifices that weren't just for atonement, Yom Kippur, right? What about those other things? I don't know if you thought through all that. I'm not saying you haven't. I'm saying I legitimately don't know. And so, like I said, this interview raises more questions from my perspective.
Actually going through Leviticus right now in my Bible study group. It's been beautiful just to see what it means to be pure, be holy before a all-loving, all-powerful God, and what position you have to take in order to even be in his presence. And so for me, understanding these principles, looking at these Old Testament principles that literally are the foundation for the new. It's not like it's two separate books. It's the Old Testament is the foundation in which we apply all these things in the New Testament, which the Lord himself, Yahweh, in Jesus Christ fulfilled. We literally see that in the law being loved, like in generalized in love through him. And so for me, it hasn't changed too much of my theological aspects, because I graduated with a bachelor's in theology, so if anything, it's really just more so, I don't want to say amplified because my mind isn't any better than the next man. It's just allowed me to see a different angle, when you look at it that way. So yeah.
That's interesting. When you think about your faith and your interaction with Hebrew Israelites on the street, how has that been? Do you feel like you're able to connect better, or do you feel like when you're engaging them, they still feel like you're off?
Yeah. So and that's the thing. Like even like them and I won't know until I get in front of an individual, because the amount of people who I know that identify as Hebrew, whether it be people who are in the pulpits, whether it be artists, rappers, Christian rappers.
And so this is something I've actually known for a while, and I think I mentioned in when Hebrew Israelite, when Eshon Burgundy said he was a Hebrew Israelite, that I actually said there's a lot more people who are not being open, and he just revealed that to be true. You got a lot of pastors who think they're Hebrews. You got a lot of rappers who think they're Hebrews, but for for whatever reason, they don't want to come out and say that they are. But you know what? I'll give Street Hymns this. I'll give him credit for coming out and taking an unpopular position and just being vocal about it. Um, Kudos to him, you know. But yeah, you have a lot of people who aren't as brave to say, yeah, I believe this. It's being closeted. If this position is so important and identify giving, you would think you would have wanted other people to know about it and shout it from the moontops, I guess. But but yeah, they're hiding it.
Lot out there, but they just don't want to come out and say it, to be honest.
Yeah, I bet.
And looking at the resources available and also diversifying your resources.
Oh yeah, so this is where I talked about what he kind of meant by diversifying your resources. But listen to this statement, guys. And if, like I said, you followed my ministry for any time, you may know some of the names he actually may be mentioning.
One of my resources I go to for sure at this point is a guy named Zadok.
Zadok, guys. Zadok ben Israel. Do not get your theology from Zadok. I made a video a while ago kind of warning Hog Mob and Bizzle, which it didn't seem like they heeded my warning, about Zadok being involved in their camp and their movement, their affiliations. And I had a friend who contacted Bizzle, and he kind of just brushed it off. Who knew Bizzle, had a personal relationship with Bizzle, and brushed it off. And why do I feel that way, right? Why do am I just hating? Just anybody claims they're Hebrew, I'm just hating, right? No. Zadok is dangerous, and there are many Christians who kind of embrace him into his circles. Zadok is dangerous because he's kind of in that middle position, the middle ground leader of Christians and Hebrew Israelites, and he's like a go-between, a mediator almost from that sense. But he's dangerous from his theological perspective. Let me bring out just a couple. And I know personally he believes this. Zadok believes that the Holy Spirit is an angel. Zadok believes we are justified we're initially, right, is by faith, and then pretty much he holds to a justification by faith and works. And the reason why I can say that is because we had a debate on that issue, and we were disagreeing. I was saying we're justified by faith alone, and he was saying we're justified by faith and works. And so on the gospel, he gets it wrong. And there are other theological issues. He doesn't believe in the deity of Christ. And so there's many theological issues with Zadok, and where you should not get diversifying your resources. Would you diversify your resources from a Mormon? No. Why? Because they're heretical. Absolutely. And he's going to try to make some kind of argument, but yeah, don't get your theology from Zadok, like I said. And I may have to link to that video to where I'm warning of some of the theological issues that he has.
In Israel, the God Hop MC, he's a part of Hog Mob, Bizzle, Seven, really, really solid group.
They're not solid, theologically speaking. And I've been hearing this for him a while, and I'm sure, who knows, it may come out now after this, but I've been hearing rumblings that Bizzle claims to be a Hebrew. And so I've been hearing that for the last 2-3 years. Like I said, I haven't made a video on it because I don't have any qualitative evidence to make a video on that. I don't do videos on rumors, but I've been hearing that from a while. And like I said, there's other people I've been hearing.
We did ministry when I was living in the hood of South Oak Cliff. And so I got put on a Hog Mob through that, met Zadok, and he put me onto a lot of these concepts and principles. So there is solid teaching, and even in the midst of whatever people call them camps or whatever it may be, or even people that are Christians who are Hebrews, in the same way I can go to a Christian who's a Lutheran, and I can go to a Christian who's a Calvinist. It's like, yes, and some Christians that are on some theological, hyper Calvinist, it's like, hey, if you're not on this, then you're not even saying. It's like, I don't know, like there's all of that in any type of mindset. So
he tries to make the parallel, just like I can go to Hebrew Israelites, I can go to maybe some Lutheran group or Calvinist group that maybe you disagree with, But here's the difference. These are in the circles of orthodoxy. Generally, Hebrew Israelite movements are not. And guess what? You have a lot of these people you're going to that are calling. I'm sure you have a close relationship with like Ishan, just because I know Ishan. At least he used to live in Dallas. I don't know anymore. That'd be interesting to find out. I'm sure y'all have fellowshipped and done things like that. I mean, he's calling now Christianity pagan. I mean, come on, And so some of these and some of these people you're now aligning yourself with have said the same thing. So
I'm citing somebody, that doesn't mean I agree with everything they say, but there is some solid teaching within things. And I think that what we should be doing is, diversifying our knowledge. When before I graduated college, like it wasn't like we only learned one doctrine. We had to learn multiple and then write papers on each so that we would know what we believe and also how to engage those who believe differently.
Yeah, and that's why I study the Hebrew Israelite movement, so I can know what I'm talking about. So guys, yeah, Street Hymns is a Hebrew Israelite, and like I said, I've been very clear on what that means for him, not just associating and lumping him with the one Western obviously heretical movement. But yeah, even the people he aligned himself with are in heresy, and so yeah, I don't know how you try to get around that, but yeah, like I said, I'm sure there will be more development. I hope to dialogue with him in the future. Hopefully that can happen. Y'all hit him up, tell him we should do something. And yeah, Lord willing, we can, like I said, dialogue. And like I said, I'm pretty sure me and Vocab want to do something further. And who knows, there may be somebody else that wants to do something as well. And so, but yeah, I've long knew that there are a lot of Hebrew Israelites in the Christian world, that lumping themselves in with the Christian world. You have that a lot, and so that's no shock or surprise to me. And so, guys, I hope this video was helpful. Hopefully it was edifying to you. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you're encouraged. And hopefully you're just able to use discernment when listening to people. Hey, use discernment when listening to me. And so, hey guys, till the next time, grace and peace. Everybody.